Hello everyone, today we're going to take a look at the Caddx Moonlight, which kind of odd. Is that the camera or is that the VTX? Because both are new. So which is it? I don't know. Maybe this is only going to be sold as a kit. I hope not, because some people might want just the camera because, Moonlight. Anywho, let's get to the specs. So the camera, the two antennas, and the VTX come in at 43.63 grams. They also have an ND filter that just slides on the nose of the camera, and this is the ND8 that does come with the kit. And with that, it comes up to 46.91 grams. You will note I'm missing that back plate. I've had this thing a long time, and I've had it in and out of a few quads. Unfortunately, I misplaced that back plate. So my weight might be a touch different if you include that in your weights. And for comparison purposes, we have the DJI 3 with its camera and single antenna, but two wires, comes in at 37.49 grams. Moonlight VTX is 15.35 millimeters tall, 34.39 wide, and pretty much the same in length. So these top mount points, they're shallow mount points. You just take an M3 screw and you thread through there, are 20 millimeters wide all the way around. And then the through holes are 25 millimeters both ways, just like the DJI 3. Now, one of the things that I did not like the most when I first got it was you had to use this to do your firmware updates. And that to me seems tricky because what happens if you misplace this? Just as I misplaced that back plate, I was really concerned I was going to misplace this. They have gone ahead and made a change to the firmware that now you can include a simple empty file called independent_upgrade.txt. And with that file, you put that on the root of your SD card because your SD card is required for firmware updates. There is no onboard storage. So with that independent_upgrade.txt file, as well as the image file for the Moonlight, it will boot up and then automatically install the firmware. And by the way, the footage that you'll see in my video is on 37.42.3, which was the latest version that came out when I started recording this video. So because it's got the Moonlight name, the first thing I did was take it outside. Our backyard is very, very dark. For those that aren't familiar, you can see the security camera along with our bedroom light up there at the top left. So I turn on the security light to the cabana and turn it around. So it isn't a moonlight camera in the fact that you can fly by only the moonlight. You're gonna need some ambient light in your area. So after I see that I can't fly it in the backyard because there isn't enough light, run through the house and take it out front to see if maybe that's flyable. Now up front, we also don't have street lights. Those that aren't familiar, you can see our yard lamp, or the light that's in the yard. No, that's not on. Our light bulb burned out. But some of the other yards do have theirs, as well as just some random house porch lights. We just have our landscape lighting on the front of our house. And this is obviously very, very flyable with what I would consider a very low amount of light. If you are in a traditional neighborhood that has street lights and you have houses, in a cul-de-sac, your houses are kind of spread apart. At least I've lived in neighborhoods where the houses are much closer together. You can also see that I flew this way back when we still had snow on the ground. So this was my first sort of flights where I was starting to get back into making videos, or at least preparing to make videos. But if you have houses that are very spread out and you have sparse lighting like this, it is flyable. It's not something I would say you're going to freestyle. You're not going to do a punch out over trees because you can't really see the branchy areas of the tree. But if you just want to go out for a nighttime flight, cruise around, do some exploration, yeah, it's very serviceable. If you have additional light, you could do a whole lot more. If you got street light, that's probably going to help you quite a bit. But you get up above the street light and darkness is going to set in. So the footage that I'm going to focus on is at 2.7K. You can go up to 4K, and that might be a miss on my part, but at 2.7K you still have the gyro data, so you still have the electronic image stabilization. You'll notice when we go through the menus that if you switch above 2.7K, that you lose the ability to record gyro data and the electronic image stabilization. So depending upon where you're at, I think in the goggles, flying about is not going to change that much, but the resolution of the onboard stored video recording, that would change, of course, and I'm not, necessarily trying to avoid showing it here. I just think there's more value for most people who are looking at this camera in seeing the 2.7K footage that does give you the ability to use gyro flow for image stabilization. This, of course, has not been stabilized because I don't want to tinker with the footage before I show you the image quality, and so I generally don't like to do that. Plus, I don't consider myself very much of a gyro flow user. Of course, you can use other stabilization software that might be out there if you happen to have a license or a hankering for something. You can use that gyro data in any stabilization software that you might have access to or prefer. It is worth noting that the power requirements on this does run from 2 to 6S. There are specifics on their website, of course. It has a field of view of 160 degrees, and the files are huge when you're recording at 4K or 2.7K. Like a 3-minute file is 2 gigs. So, or not even 3 minutes, like between 2 and 3 minutes, you're going to get some really big file sizes. So that's something else that you have to consider. I think they can enhance the camera controls that we have as far as the saturation, the brightness, and the ISO and the frame rates. Hopefully the hardware exists within it to where we can adjust or make some micro fine-tuning adjustments to the camera, especially for those professionals out there that might be choosing between video systems. Maybe you have access to both and you're just trying to choose which one you're going to use for a particular shoot. As far as the 30 FPS stuff, I did fly it. I didn't find it to really dampen my ability to fly like I might normally fly, but that's very subjective, I think. But I do want to give you the option of asking me, and so I've tried to answer that question. The menuing system, of course, we have different scenes that we can choose. We can have different EV levels, as you can see there on screen, saturation, sharpness, white balance. You can actually rotate the camera, so if you've got the camera mounted, maybe on accident, upside down, or you have a very unique sort of hardware need and you are mounting it sideways, you should be able to rotate the camera. We also have different aspect ratios, 16:9 and 4:3. I did find that in 4:3 it just kind of crops the image. It's not actually changing the actual ratio, it's just cropping it down. But this is an area where I think when it comes to the camera that they can add some controls for, specifically for those professionals that don't want to add an external HD camera. Maybe that's a requirement. You know, I don't shoot professionally at all. Matter of fact, the time or two I've been asked, I've just said no thank you, because I don't want to be accountable for knowing something I don't know. I am not a videographer, or I am not a photographer. I am not a commercialized specialist. I make videos for fun, and I try to show you them and share my experience as best I can. I did not expect to see the ability to change the shutter on this. So that, I think, you tell me, those that are professionals out there or that you just have a better understanding, you know, is that something useful? I would think it would be useful, but maybe not. I've seen a number of videos on GoPros and things like that where they pick a particular shutter speed, but I don't fully understand why. You might want to lock certain features rather than have it adjust on its own as well. As we go into the VTX settings, we have the different video modes that it's going to record onto the SD card. Of course, this does not impact your recording on your goggles, or the DVR recording, as we commonly say. We have the traditional features that are available on all the VTXs through the Walksnail system, but we have a few additional resolutions that are allowed, or that are present for this Moonlight system. I've got to pause real quick. I was editing this video and I got a message from someone that was asking me about when I was going to have this out. I think they're just probably looking for another, opinion about things. But I think, especially if you're trying to choose between the Caddx Walksnail system with the Moonlight and the DJI 3, one particular video I have to recommend. I was sent the video and I watched it while I was editing here, and I would suggest go to TronCat FPV's channel, and I'll link it down in the video description, and watch his. He's got a very unique 3D print to where he's able to record and sync both of these up, and then he uses GyroFlow to stabilize them. So it gives you a really good kind of spot on sort of comparison between these two video systems when you want to record or want to look at the recording itself. So again, TronCat FPV down in the video description. I'll link to his Avatar Moonlight video, because I think that's one if you're choosing between the two, or you just want to see a comparison between the two, it's going to be really important. And this is the DVR file from the goggles. I wanted to be sure to include this just so that if you need any reassurance of how things look, as far as a perspective of the goggles, this is how it looked with the goggles. Of course, this is not a representation of what you see. It's just a representation of what the goggles record. To sum up, I wanted to go over the things I did not like. So I mentioned this already. That's kind of been remedied. And one of the big reasons I didn't like this is you can actually put this in and it will look like it's fully seated, and it's not, because these connectors are so small that I've got it in right now. I can tell because when you've got it in, it actually goes just inside the case a little bit. but you can actually, let's see if I can just do it on camera here. It will look like, yeah, it'll look like you've got it in. See, even this way, it looks like it's in, but it's not. So, or at least I think one of those ways is wrong, but they both look the same. And that got to be very frustrating for me. Of course, we have our SD card here, which we typically can manage that with just a fingernail. So you want a high-speed SD card. You don't want some cheap one that came with your radio or something like that. We know those are the lowest quality SD cards that the manufacturers can buy. They fail all the time. We have, I mentioned it already, we've got these shallow mounts, so you can mount this to a top plate of a quad. This is where our connector goes, that wiring harness. I've still got it connected to the quad because after this video is done, I'm going to reconnect it. This is our status lights, and that also, those lights change when you're updating the firmware as well. Matter of fact, they go blue, green, red, I think, and they flash different colors during the updating of the firmware process. Linking, of course, is the button, just like with the other video systems out there that require the button pressing. They do have solder pads down here for TX and RX, so you could use that. Now, I'm not crazy about that, but at least it's there. It's just not very accessible. Something else I don't like is how you have to put these antennas in. Pretty much you're going to have to take a flat screwdriver, get this lined up as best you can, maybe put your magnifying glass on or something like that, and then you're going to have to get the flat screwdriver to the top while you're holding this in place to get it to click down. I think that's a really, really poor choice. It's tedious. You know, I've been putting these tiny UFL antennas on a lot of different things for a long time, and I found that process to be tedious, and I just don't see a reason other than the board orientation inside the case why it came out that way. It needs to be probably repositioned down here. So if it's on this lower board, then this would be at the bottom part, and then we just have a typical plate like we have here for the camera and like we see with the DJI system. So that I don't like those particular things. Some things that I do like is the fact that we still have the, well, one, we have the same mounting. So whether a frame has been built for the 03 or the HD0 Freestyle V2 or the Moonlight, they'll all work. And that's good for us as consumers to be able to choose any old frame we want. It's good for the frame designers. They don't have to have 3 or 4 different frames. It's good for those people that sell frames that they don't have to have 3 or 4 different kinds in stock. Of course, for the Whoop boards of our VTX systems, namely HD0 and Walksnail, you know, that's different. You know, that's the micro realm. It's kind of a tough spot to be in. So that's a really good thing for us as consumers. Choice really opens up. An interesting feature that I don't know how it's going to play out is this little rubber inside the screws that could help with some micro vibrations that get into the camera. Those are something we're going to have to find out going down the road. Does it actually do anything, or is it just something that was precautionary? Maybe in some cases it does, in other cases it doesn't, but time will tell on that. I think the recording looked good. I think from time to time I thought it looked a little bit, I thought the contrast, I think, was a little bit high. Things looked a little shimmery from time to time with that high contrast. Maybe it's something that you can tweak out, because I did fly it on the defaults. I fly cameras uniformly on defaults for 2 reasons. 1, I'm not terribly picky, and 2, when they send a product for review, yes, this was sent for review, it's their responsibility to make it look as good as possible, not mine. I'm just here to show it to you. And I'm not going to go through every little setting and test everything they should have tested before they sent it in order to make the video look good. And then it's very subjective by my standards versus your standards, versus the company should have done their homework. They have people that they could have put it in front of, and they could have chose the best one it looks for. So I flew it on defaults, and that's the video that you've seen in this video presentation. Cost on this is fairly expensive. It's $189, but it's not as expensive as something that's, $239. So that might be something else that if you're looking to jump into one of the video systems, if you're comparing this to the DJI 3, again, TronCat FPV's video, I'll link it down in the video description. This is going to save you money. It's going to be cheaper, and it's more flexible. You don't have to have DJI goggles to fly this. You can have standard FPV goggles with the VRX, although some people are affected by the latency when it comes to the VRX into the goggles, or you can buy the Goggles X directly from Cadix/Walksnail. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.